Welcome back to Mean Streets, where each week we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir.
I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth. Today's case is 2005's Sin City, starring Mickey Rourke, Clive Owen, and Bruce Willis, and directed by Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller. The logline for Sin City from IMDb is an exploration of the dark and miserable Basin City and three of its residents, all of whom are caught up in violent corruption. Luke, are you a fan of the comic?
Well, I've only read one of them, and I had to remind myself what actually happens in it. And I've only read The Hard Goodbye, which is the middle portion of this movie. It's I'm a big comic book reader, but this one is one that I've not read in its full. But I enjoyed The Long Goodbye or The Hard Goodbye, and I think the art style is fantastic, and I love the black and whiteness of it and whatnot. So I'm a fan of the style, and I'm a fan of this book, but I've not read it in its full as full disclosure. What about you?
Well, I'm the same, really.
Yeah.
I think this is a film based on, I think, the first, third, and fourth books. But I would say, it's decades since I read any of them. So I won't claim to be an expert on the comics because I'm not. So like you, I read them a long time ago. They made an impression. I enjoyed the artwork. I enjoyed the storytelling. I do like Frank Miller's work. But the film is what I know, most about.
Most. Fair enough. Did you see the film when it came out?
Yes, I think I probably did. So, and I think I've seen it several times since. But yeah, I'll have been one of those people sitting in the audience in 2005.
So you were there for the April Fool's joke.
Well, I don't know about that. What's that?
Because this came out April 1st, 2005.
Oh, did it? I won't have been at the opening. There's no way I'll have been at the first night job. I don't actually remember going. I don't actually remember. I've no vivid memories of going, but I will have seen a lot of films around that time.
Yeah. I definitely did not see this in cinemas. I would have been in the States when it came out. I probably would have been a bit too young. I wasn't quite 18 yet. I was just about. I was thereabouts. So I probably could have gotten in. They probably wouldn't have carded me because I had a full beard at that time. And I'm trying to think. Yes, I probably could have gotten in, but I didn't see this one in the cinema. I didn't know anyone. I remember it coming out. I remember the trailers. I remember the artwork. I remember the splash. But it just was. It was also a bit early for me in my crime fiction exploration and interests, and before I was very much into hard-boiled stuff as well. So it was just early for me for a lot of different reasons. So I didn't watch it. I think I must have watched it when I moved to the UK, because by the time I moved to the UK, the second one was about to come out. That came out in 2009, 2010?
Yeah, something like that, I think.
Yeah, let me think. Let me see here. A sequel was directed by Rodriguez. Was released in 2014. Okay, I definitely watched it well before the second one then. So I must have watched it during when I came to uni. Someone must have said you need to see this, and I watched it.
Well, I think just because its style was so different. And yes. So we'll talk more about this, but the way it looks was so different to everything else that was being done. No, I've not seen any of the sequels. Funnily enough, mustn't have thought. Is there only one? Well, it shows how much I know about sequels to these.
Just the day. What was it called? A Dame to Kill For. I'm interested to see it. I would like to see that. Actually,
I somewhere along the way, I clearly thought, well, I've seen enough of Sin City. So yes. I don't need to see a sequel.
Yes,
but watching it again. Maybe I'll give it a go. I seem to remember it not getting as good reviews, not doing as well, the sequel. And I do wonder if part of that is because the first one had done so much and done it pretty well that this, the sort of gimmick, if that's the right word, or the sort of attraction of the film had already been gone, and it's not the same second time around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they waited a long time. They waited, what, 9 years?
9 years.
That's a heck of a long wait for a film that I don't know, like, in the pantheon of film noir, and even in comic book movies. I mean, 2014, we're talking the height of Marvel. DC's churning stuff out. X-Men movies are coming out with Fox. It's a big era. It's a big time for comic movies. I feel like someone said, "Oh yeah, we've got this Sin City thing. People like that 9 years ago. Let's see if we can squeeze some more." That's the vibe I get probably from the sequel.
I think you're probably right, but it's important in it to say there are comic book movies and there are comic book movies.
Yes.
This very much.
Or to quote Willis's character, there's comic book movies and then there's comic book movies and then there's this.
Yeah. I was going to say this is very much the latter, but yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with Willis's character. This is something else entirely.
Do you remember your initial impressions of Sin City when you first saw it?
Not when I very first saw it, no, but I remember watching it again. So it must have been years later, on TV probably. Remember thinking, oh god, yeah, I remember this. But my overriding memory of it is the visuals. That's what stuck in my mind, and especially the really quite admirable effort that had been made to make the actors look like they do in the comics.
Yes,
particularly Mickey Rourke. Rourke.
Yeah.
So and then remembering just how bloody it is and how violent it is, which is something
pornographic it is.
Pornographic it is. Yeah, I'd forgotten a lot of the whole sequence set in the red light district.
Yes.
Well, with all those women coming out, thinking, my God, if you saw this if you some chance saw this when you were 15, you'd have something to say about it, wouldn't you?
Oh my gosh, yes.
But yeah, I think I'd forgotten how brutal it is. And we'll perhaps talk about the violence a bit later on. But I never found myself disturbed by it or offended by it or, thinking, oh, gone a bit too far there. If anything, it's a comic book movie.
Yeah.
Some of the things that people survive are ludicrous.
Well, yeah, it's hyper realistic. It's very much a Tarantino, like they're going Tarantino vibe, where it's lots and lots and lots of blood, lots and lots of violence, but it's also hyper that I don't necessarily cringe at it because
no,
it's so far removed from reality that it's like it's like, for example, like the scene in the Terminator 2 where he cuts his skin off and reveals his metal arm. That to me, actually, that makes my skin crawl.
Yeah, definitely.
None of this makes my skin crawl.
No, this is like an X-rated Tom and Jerry cartoon.
That's a good one. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
An X-rated Tom and Jerry. Yes.
I mean that's watching it in preparation for this. That was what was going through my mind. This is hitting people in the face with frying pans and they get up. It's very much that.
Yeah. So I mean, Mickey Rourke's character gets hit by the car. Marv gets hit multiple times by a car and he's flipping through the air. And he's absolutely fine. The world is set up quite clearly from the very beginning of what kind of violence and ability to survive is going to be and manages some of your expectations with that. So it's like, okay, this is all just super super hyper realistic and you just roll with that, and
you've got to go with it. Yeah, you've got to go with it. Yeah, and once you accept that, once you buy into that, I mean, I think this film is great fun. And you're right, the fictional reality of it is set up very well because it's not really set in any time period that you can pin down. A bit.
It's like weird. They're old cars, and yet there are people on cell phones, and people dress as if they're from 2005, but then other people dress as if they're from the 40s.
Yeah, and some
It's
people
odd.
are talking like we did in 2005, and then some people are calling women dames and doll.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and that reminded me of the Batman animated series,
Mm.
which is set in what looks like the 40s, but
Yeah.
there's all this technology around it, you know, which is a steal from the Burton Batman films, particularly the first one, and a conscious steal. So, and I quite like that. I like that impression of the real world. That means you can get away with some bonkers things, which is what this film does extremely well.
It does. Now, I guess I didn't see it in cinema. I must have seen it once I moved, sometime after I moved to the UK. And the part of the reason why I was very keen to rewatch it for this was because I remember my initial impression of it was that I didn't like it.
Fair enough.
And
for a reason that
that we will get into.
We're going to get into. Fair enough.
Most of them are story related.
Right, okay.
Versus acting versus graphics versus CGI. I'll happily just go out on now and just say on record now and say that it back in the day it left me wanting. I'm not sure that my opinion has grossly changed.
Okay.
But I approach this film in a very complicated way. And that is, I text you yesterday morning, and I was like, for F's sake, the version I watched was some recut and extended version. And what happened was I went to Amazon, looked it up, was just gonna buy the digital copy, and there were two Sin Cities, but they both say Sin City, and I thought must be a glitch. Clicked the first one, bought the first one, bada bing, bada boom, and watched it. And it wasn't until I started doing extra research that I was like, wait a minute, this is not the film that I watched. What the heck? And then I realized, oh my God, I watched this recut version of the movie. And then I went back and got the original theatrical cut of the movie and then rewatched it with that. So I've watched this movie twice because I didn't want to come in ignorant.
Well,
to this.
Yeah, and if you'd not done, we'd be talking about two different films, I think.
Well, it is interesting. We'll do a bit of contrasting. Some of the recut stuff when we dive into the story, because that's where. But it was definitely a very interesting experience watching the two different cuts, and I found myself warming up to the theatrical cut far more than I did the recut.
I was just going to say, do you have a preference? No, you've seen both.
The theatrical cut. Fuck the recut.
Yeah, absolutely.
This episode is going to be labeled explicit. I don't care for this one. Fuck the recut.
Well, I mean, it's no less explicit than the film, perhaps. But I for full disclosure, I've not seen the recut, and I didn't know the recut existed until I got your text. So I immediately went and tried to find something out about it, and even having not seen it, just from what I've read about it, I have some things to say which make me think that I would be sharing your view that the theatrical cut is the one that I would recommend.
Yes. And interestingly, the recut highlights some of the bigger problems of the theatrical cut in some ways, but I'll dive into those in a little bit. I think let's go behind the camera, chat a little bit about the some of the behind the scenes stuff. So, I mean, like you said, the film was a massive success. Its budget was 40 million, made 158.7 million.
Just shy of 160 million it made.
Yeah. Heck of a take from its global box office.
Which I am surprised that the sequel didn't come hot on the heels of it, which is the normal Hollywood way of things.
Yes.
So, maybe they were just sort of too bamboozled by it. I don't know, but there's no denying it was a success.
Yes, it's. I guess this is the thing, because I've only read the first comic. I don't know if the A Dame to Die For is that one of the other books.
I honestly, I imagine so. I think it's based on the second one, I think.
Okay, so weirdly they cut the second one out.
So they cut the second one out of the first film.
Yes, for some reason,
and then film that as the sequel. That's
and I don't know why.
In order.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I don't know why. Now let's talk about Robert Rodriguez.
Okay,
he's a director that I get a bit sort of. I'm never wowed by. To be blunt, this might be his best film.
I'll put it out
there.
Yeah, but I'm not blown away by this fella either.
No, but his background, some of the films that he's directed are things like From Dusk Till Dawn, which is a lot of people love it. I think it's it has one of the sexiest scenes in cinematic history. but
yes,
but the film itself is terrible. It's a badly constructed narrative that just has similar problems to what I think Sin City is going to have as we dive in, but it's just weak on character, weak on plot, weak on motive, just a little bit thin all throughout. But his other outings are things like The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, whatever. Planet Terror, which
Spy Kids.
Spy Kids, whatever. And he's also he did the Alita Battle Angel, which was a film that had potential, but just wasn't very good in the end. It had its moments, but you could tell that they tacked on the sequel to the end of that movie. And I don't know if it was like a Sin City thing. I was like, well, we might not get our sequel, but we might get it 10 years from now. Well, let's just tack it on to the end of this one. And it was odd. It was odd. But he also directed The Faculty, which had Elijah Wood in it, which might explain Elijah Wood's funny little role.
Cameo in this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing that I found out is that he produced the Predator movie Predators, which came out in 2010 or something like that. That film I actually quite enjoy as a Predator film, and apparently that one is based on some of his early ideas that he sort of had for that. And that I so I'm like, all right, cool. I like that. I like Predators. You get Predators.
Yeah, but over quite a long filmography. I mean, it's been going since 1992.
Yeah,
we're not saying that he's done very many decent films in this period of time. No. And for my money, he's done. Maybe I'm being unfair, but he's done far too many Spy Kids movies. I didn't know there were that many.
I mean, that was a hot franchise. Guess
there's loads of them. Yeah, there's loads of them.
Yes,
but I agree. The Faculty is one. I was going to give him From Dusk Till Dawn just because at the time it was so big and it was so popular, and it was one of those films that I remember thinking, "Oh, this is quite good," because I went to the pictures to see that, and thinking, "Oh, this is quite good." And in the years after, thinking, "Well, actually, it's not as good as I thought it was."
No.
Yeah. Time is a great healer, as we know. But I do think Sin City is perhaps his best work. I agree with that, and I think it's the film that I would associate him with the most, funnily enough, because it's so standard amongst all the others that he's done. It stands out so much. I think that's what I admire about it.
Yes, and I guess we should also talk. Frank Miller directed it as well, which is interesting.
Well, Frank. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't really know what to make of that. I don't know how much of it he did direct.
I mean, he must have done a significant amount, or he wouldn't have the credit. Because he has the credit. So he must have been there. They co-directed this, which is just interesting to me. I mean, it's a weird one. I can't think of another instance where the creator of the story that's being adapted is also the director. Like it'd be like J.K. Rowling directing a Harry Potter, like co-directing a Harry Potter film.
I can't think of another example.
I don't know. I like Frank Miller a lot. His comic book stuff is great. Daredevil Born Again is fantastic. Batman Year One, Dark Knight Returns. I love all that stuff. I'm a bit of a fan of RoboCop 2, not massive, but a bit. And the script for RoboCop 3 that he really wanted to write was adapted, and he adapted into a comic a number of years ago, came out as a comic book, and it's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. But yeah, so I like a lot of his style. I like his grittiness, and I think it's interesting having him as part of the directing team and seeing what he sort of brings to this. But I can see he's credited as directed this, The Spirit, and the sequel to Sin City. So those are his film directing credits, which are very interesting to me.
The Spirit didn't do very well at all.
No,
The Spirit was a bit of a bomb.
Yes.
So I wonder whether, is this one of those cases where you can't necessarily let Miller have full control of a film? Do you know what I mean? Is he better collaborating? Because for The Spirit, he is director and screenwriter.
He's sole director. Yeah.
So
it's possible. It is possible, but
I agree with you about his grittiness. I like his grittiness. I like what he does with. What I've always liked about Frank Miller is that he takes these age-old characters, Batman and Superman particularly, but not quite as age-old, but still fairly old, and Daredevil, and does something new with them. He takes them to places that they've not gone before. That to me really is the way to, it's an impressive way of dealing with these age-old characters. But then also with Batman, he goes back to the very beginning and says, well, what would it have been like before he started? Yeah. And that's really good. I find that quite exciting because these characters need reinvention. They need pulling out of out of their doldrums sometimes. And Miller is the man to do it.
He's really good at injecting that hard-boiled element into some of these properties that have at the time had lost it. Yeah. And he brings it he brings it to life in a very unique way, because sometimes I read comic books and read like an X-Men or something like that, and sometimes they're a little bit one-dimensional. The characters are a little bit flat, stuff like that. But then every once in a while, these characters fall into certain people's hands, and you're just like, holy shit. And Daredevil Born Again is a perfect example of, we're going to take Daredevil, we're going to make it serious, we're going to take it back to being serious. And, it's the character pops, all the characters pop in a very different way. That's shocking, and it's gritty, and you're just like, I can't, this is amazing that this is actually children's literature.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so adult. I love it.
And he does the same thing for Batman, doesn't he? He's one of the leading, him and Denny O'Neil, one of the leading heroes in my book for getting Batman out of Adam West's hands. And that's not to say I don't like Adam West. Yeah. But for too long, Batman had been slumbering in the in the nuts and the bonkers, and they take him back to it. Those two particularly take him back to his roots. And I love what he does with Superman in The Dark Knight Returns, and makes him a government weapon, which is exactly what a government. Well, I mean, these days that's exactly what they'd make Superman be. Yes. So he's able to do that and not really care if he upsets people. Because he's able to do it convincingly. Superman's meant to be above it all, but in The Dark Knight Returns, he is a government weapon. So Miller's very good at that. He's very good at taking on these characters and doing something with them that is shocking, but you buy into it, And I think this is his take on noir literature. Yes. So taking characters like Marlowe and Sam Spade and people like that, not necessarily making them private eyes, but saying, well, we'll take some people who are willing to walk down mean streets and see what we can do with them. Yes. That's what I think is very successful with Sin City.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting on the screenwriting side of this, that there is no one credited as the writer for this movie. It's simply credited as an adaptation of Frank Miller's, based on Frank Miller's graphic novel. Essentially, Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller are the ones who wrote this movie. Someone had to write the script. They're the ones who did it. And, as an adaptation, I can only really speak to The Hard Goodbye. It's quite faithful. It's fairly faithful. In many ways, it feels like the precursor to Watchmen, in that Zack Snyder was 90-80%, accurate to what that book was visually and narratively. And, I do appreciate that's an aspect of this film that I do appreciate, the attempt to be accurate in bringing these pages to life, because that is essentially what's happening.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's, some of the shot, there's a shot where Bruce Willis is walking out of a prison. And the way the bars are reflected in the moonlight onto the sidewalk is just absolutely beautiful. And there are shots in this that feel very Watchmen-like, or vice versa, really.
Yeah.
And that attempt to get actual panels from the comic book on the screen, I think is all to be lauded. It's all to be lauded. And just, I like the fact that it doesn't say edited by and directed by. It says shot and cut by.
Yes.
I just think even the credits are telling you what to expect in this. It's brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff for me.
I mean, even like that. Go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say that attempt to make a comic book come alive. This is one of the more successful, and to give you a visual, an audible sensation of what it's like to read a comic book. I think this is one of the better examples.
I think so. I mean, because even an example we can use is the opening scene of The Hard Goodbye. Marv is getting into bed with Goldie, and there again, Zack Snyder must have been taking notes, because the way that the sex scene plays out is very much like what the panels are. I mean, even to the point to where to get graphic about it, I guess, even to the point that the way that she is positioned and the outline of her breasts and stuff like that is exactly what it is in the comics. It's very much leaning into there's a lot of gratuity in this movie. When I jokingly said pornographic earlier, this film is quite pornographic, and I don't really have a problem with it. It's very bloody, it's very pornographic, and very seedy. But then again, we're talking about something that is called Sin City, and I like that this property, this story is really unapologetic about just how I don't know, gross, or how unforgiving, how selfish the world is. It's very narcissistic. It's very, it's unapologetic. Yeah, it's very, very nasty, and that's just part of the world. And this film just doesn't shy away from any of that. And that's in terms of things that I think in its favor. It's very hyper stylized, but also quite in its honesty. I bought the grossness of what people are doing, and the nastiness of people, that feels believable to me, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. Because essentially what the film, I think he's saying is, you live in a nasty place, and if we're going to make a film about it, and if you're going to say that noir is about nasty things, then you need to show nasty things. Otherwise, you're not being brave. You're not putting your money where your mouth is. You're not being brave enough to have the courage of your convictions. And what stops it being, for me, I agree it's gratuitous. Some of the violence is gratuitous, and some of the sex is. But overall, what and women don't come out particularly well in this film. Women don't get a good deal in this film.
But do the men?
No, that's another point I'm going to make later on. No, there's nobody likable in this, but I think that's the point. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
It's very much a film where you're rooting for anti-heroes. It's just that the people they're going after are worse than they are, so you've got to root for somebody. But I think what stops it being grotesque to me and grotesquely gratuitous to me is that stylized hyper reality of it, because it does, as I say, it becomes cartoonish when it's in danger of going too far to make it essentially a video nasty.
Yeah.
It pulls itself back, not by much, but it does, because it reminds you that this is a comic and that this is cartoon violence. However in your face it really is. That's what I take away from this film. But I can imagine, I wouldn't recommend my mum watch this, for example. Although she's got a pretty strong stomach as my mum, and she's quite good at horror films. But I think she just think this was cheap and nasty. Yeah, and in a way, I think that's the point.
I think so. Some of the early criticisms of Sin City was that it lacked humanity. And was just criticized for its huge amount of violence, the violence against women, the exploitative and overly sexualized, aspect of what's happening. And while I hear that criticism, there is also a part of me that's thinking, well, maybe you missed the point.
Yeah,
it's called Sin City for a reason.
Yeah, I would say that no one is presented in this as a hero.
No.
This film isn't asking you to find an Indiana Jones figure or even a Philip Marlowe figure or a Sam Spade figure.
Yeah.
Because I think it might be a controversial thing to say, but I think even Sam Spade had turned his nose up at some of this. You know what I mean? And he's a real anti-hero. But I don't think it's asking you to do that. And I think if you go into this trying to find some redemption or some humanity, I think you're going to be, you will be sorely disappointed, but I wonder why you're bothering to look for it in a film that is called Sin City.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because they say lack of humanity, but I'm not sure I buy that entirely, because Marv's quest to avenge this Goldie, this woman who was going to give him, who was going to pleasure him, because no one else will, not even other hookers will. She was special to him for some reason, and he was special to her. He is very dead set on doing that. And is that not a shred of humanity?
This is why
Bruce Willis's character, John Hart, I can't remember his name now. John Hartigan is his determination to solve that final case and rescue that girl from a pedophile. Is that not a shred of humanity? Him being so distraught when her letters stop, worrying that she's been abducted and willing to confess to something he didn't do in order to get out, in order to find her, to make sure she's safe. Is that not,
Yeah,
shreds of humanity.
There are, and I think the critic who says no humanity is using the wrong word. I think, because you're right, there is, but it may not be a humanity he recognizes, this particular critic. But nevertheless, the moral code, that old tired phrase, the moral code that noir has, these characters are riddled with it. How they go about enforcing it, we may not agree with, and we may find is horrendous. But are they any different to heroes that save the girl? If I can use an old cliche, because that's what they're doing. And really, Marv, Mickey Rourke's character, Hartigan, Bruce Willis's character, and Dwight McCarthy, which is Clive Owen's character, they're all doing the same thing. They're all saving a girl. Yes. So yeah, on the one hand, I do think, if you're looking for some apple pie humanity, let's call it that, you're going to be sort of disappointed. But if you're looking for men that you might not want to meet in the street or be cornered with in a bar, living by a code of morality that you could perhaps understand if you just took a step away from it, you get it in this film. You get it in this film.
Yeah. It's
rough justice, I think, is the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
this is no different to this is really no different to what Dirty Harry does. Dirty Harry goes and he gets the bad guys on his own terms because the law isn't doing it. That's the same level of humanity and moral code that will send Dirty Harry down to get a sniper who's assassinating people at will, or to go after a gang of rapists or whatever other ones are in that film. Officers above the law. He's doing that because it's the right thing to do. It's just that no one else has got the guts to do it. That's what I think these three characters are doing. Yeah,
I would agree with that, definitely. You can see all three of these storylines. The salesman is the outlier. He is just there to kill a person. But your other three kind of main protagonists, they really are there to function as a rotten hero. And they accomplish it well. Now,
what do you think? Sorry, I was just a very quick question about what do you think of Hartigan? Saving a girl from a paedophile when she's 19 and he must be in his I don't know what, saying that he loves her too.
So yeah, let's dive into that because that's a discussion. I found it gross, to be honest.
Yes.
I didn't like it whatsoever. I was on board for the beginning. He goes and saves the girl. He gets shot. He's about to die. She curls up in his lap. I see that as there was an innocence to that. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Fine. There was an innocence to him reading those letters and feeling something towards this girl because he's been accused of horrific things that he did not do. He did not rape her, but he's accused of doing it. And his wife has left him. And the only person he's getting in contact with is letters from Nancy, under the name Cordelia, I think it is. And I like that. That's all fine. And I like that when she stopped sending letters, he's like, why did she stop? Interestingly, I don't know why the film never addresses why she stops. And then here's where some of my problems begin to seep in. At no point does the film address it. At no point once he get out, does he ask, why do you stop sending me letters?
Yeah. I wonder if there were cut scenes on that. I mean, I don't know.
If they were, they probably would have been in the recut extended version, and they weren't.
Yeah. I had the same problem with that.
Yeah, I don't think that they ever addressed it. That really, really annoyed me because when he finally meets up with her, she mentions her letters as if they were still coming, and I'm like, what? But I sort of understand that her life went down a very tragic route, Nancy's life. And she's Jessica Alba. She's this stripper girl, whatever, getting into bad situations romantically. I understand why there could be a sort of syndrome in which she sort of thinks that she loves Bruce. I really, really, really desperately wanted Bruce to take the higher road and not give in. And the fact that he does turn around and says that he loves her, but not like a parental fatherly love, which is what I was wanting him to do. It was a seedy sexual, I am in love with you. He sees her on stage. Oh, she's filled out over these last years. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like, all that was horrendous. All that's horrendous. And it makes his sacrifice at the end. Well, he makes two serious sacrifices, doesn't he? One with his reputation and one with his life. And it cheapens them.
I think so.
Because his motivation stops being pure.
Yes.
Whereas before, it was absolutely pure.
But then we are in Sin City. This is the conflict.
This is why it's so interesting. This is why I asked the question, really, because he is in Sin City. Because I agree with you. I thought, now hang on. Is the intention here that she's saying I love you because she adores him? And and kids can do that. Or is he And is he replying "I love you too" as a father, and that's why I've gone through all this? Not a real father, but a father figure, the daughter I never had, sort of thing. And I thought maybe it's that, and then I thought, well, if it is, he doesn't deliver that line well enough for you to get that absolutely. And then, as you rightly say, that does not coexist with the lechy language he uses when he walks into that bar.
Yeah. It's, this is where it's like, the humanity, that it's everything is morally bankrupt. There are bent morals all throughout this that makes it very complicated. No one is a real hero. No one is, we think of anti-heroes in 2024. Everyone's like Deadpool, okay, whatever. He's always the good guy in the end. But like, these guys are proper anti-heroes. They're
They
saving
really are.
people, but they are also nasty people.
But they are nasty people as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And
they are Get Carter. They are Frank Carter.
Yeah.
But in a heightened reality. But for me, when the credits rolled, I thought, well, the one I have the most respect for is Marv.
Same.
He's at least constant, and I've got an issue with Dwight McCarthy. I think he comes across as quite weak compared to the other two, or not as interesting, perhaps not weak, not as interesting. But
yes,
Marv is definitely true to himself. He's the massive embodiment of "To Thine Own Self Be True," and he hasn't slid from his. He's a dreadful man.
Yes,
and you won't want to know him, but he hasn't drifted from his code at all. Bruce Willis has turned into the very thing he's hunted.
It feels that way. It's complicated because she is of age, so it's not doing anything illegal. No, but it does feel sleazy.
It does, yeah. It feels wrong to me. It may not be illegal, but it don't feel right.
No, it feels predatorial in that, oh, this girl has been through all of this abuse, all of this stuff. Now she's in this sort of profession and kind of just always lived in this world of abuse. And now I'm gonna, she likes me, so hey, she's hot. Let's go for it.
Yeah, and it's almost as if he's thought, well, and she's of age, so I won't be doing anything wrong. And he's zero compassion then. Zero sort of stop cheering for him even.
Yes.
Whereas I never stopped cheering for Marv.
No, Marv was great.
Marv is the best thing in it. I think he's the best character in it. Or certainly of the protagonists, he's the best character.
My hot take is that I think they did the film a disservice and the characters a disservice by cramming 3 out of 4 books into one. Because each storyline could have filled out an entire film. And honestly, when it started, because I'd recently thumbed through The Hard Goodbye, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't how it starts. But confusingly, to add to the goddamn motherfucking confusion of this stupid thing, you know how the way Sin City starts with the extended recut version, which it was a bonus. It was done in like 2010 or something like that, and it was a bonus added on to the DVD release. Which I don't understand why. Just when I was searching for this film, I don't understand why it just didn't say it. Extended recut version, like it just should have said that with the title. Like if you go to buy Lord of the Rings digitally, it will tell you what's theatrical and just in the name. I said that drove me nuts. Anyway, you mentioned that Dwight was the weakest or the dullest. Weirdly enough, this is where the film starts. It starts with the Brittany Murphy scene, the Sheila scene, where Jackie is banging on her door wanting to get into her flat. In the recut, that's where this starts. Whereas in the real movie, the theatrical version, it starts with the salesman on the rooftop killing the girl in a red dress.
Yeah.
So the things that the things that the recut does, but I want to use this to focus on Dwight as well, is that instead of this film having salesman scene, Bruce Willis scene, Marv's storyline, then Dwight's storyline, then back to Bruce with then the final tag of of the salesman scene, it puts everything in one block. So the film opens with the big fat kill, and you just watch that segment all in its full. Sure, that's what happens in the theatrical version as well. Okay, fine. But then you suddenly watch all of the salesman scenes in one block, and then you watch all of Marv's scenes in one block, and then you watch all of Bruce Willis's scenes in one block. And I don't, and so basically what they've done is they've divided them up into their books. And so you're watching their books, bam, 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 bam. But it disrupts the flow of narrative. It disrupts the flow of information, and it's confusing and also really boring. It's weird.
Yeah.
It was actually boring to watch it in that way. Like, I have a friend who back in the early 2000s, as a kick, re-edited the Lord of the Rings movies to be like they would have been in the books. So in the books, it's like you have the Aragorn storyline with all of his little buddies, while then you have the Frodo and Sam storyline happening at this end of the book, right? So he basically edited each film to be as if how the books were presented, and watching in that way, watching all of the Frodo and Sam scenes together was boring as shit.
I can imagine.
And it's because it's so glum. It's so it's just it's great. It's great in the way that it's edited in the movie, but it's interesting how editing can change your mood.
Absolutely,
on something. Definitely. And I had that with this. I just thought this was, the things that it highlighted were things like the salesman is utterly superfluous. Why the hell is that even in this movie? Accomplishes nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Take it out.
Yeah.
Take it out. But it also highlights the fact that The Hard Goodbye is where they put the most effort, I think. And that should have been the whole film. Because, as you mentioned, Clive Owen's Dwight was that I was getting bored by him and bored by that whole storyline. Discuss.
Yeah. Well, me too. And I have to say, well, the first thing I want to say is if you show these stories in the order like they do in the recut version, and they're all in their individual books, then one of the things I like about this, and I know it's a very Pulp Fiction thing to do, but is the way that when Bruce Willis walks in and sees Jessica Alba dancing, you're right back at the beginning of the film, and then that suddenly makes sense. And that's like pieces of a puzzle slotting into place then. You think, right. But also what it does is it tells you that these stories are going on all at the same time. Mm-hmm. You can't have it all shown to you at the same time, so you have to have a narrative or a device to explain that. And I find that quite rewarding. I really do. But this would just become, the way you've described the recut version makes it feel to me like one of those old 1970s anthology horror films.
Mm-hmm.
Where somebody goes into an antique shop and buys something, it's haunted. Somebody goes into the same antique shop and buys something else, and it's haunted.
Yes,
things like that, which can be great fun, depending on the stories. But there's always one boring one or one weak one. Always.
Yes.
And I would say the Clive Owen is that example. I think it's.
I think so.
Because I like you, I was getting a bit bored of it, and I was thinking, this is dragging for me now. This is really sort of going nowhere. And that the Irish mercenaries bit, I'm thinking, let's just get to the end of this now. You don't need this.
No,
you don't need this. What you need is for him to be with his girlfriend, and then for him out of the Green Mile to arrive. And then you can have the showdown there and then. That's what you need. This is going on too long.
Yeah.
Because I quite like Clive Owen. I don't want to knock him as an actor. I think he's all right. At one stage, he was my choice for Bond, but that's a different discussion. But I kept thinking. So I like him as an actor. I think he's good. But when you've just come off the back of Marv,
yes,
and you've just come off the back of Hartigan, who has just castrated a man and blown his ears off. And Marv has done everything that he does. Dwight feels a bit wet. He flushes a man's head down the toilet.
Well, I wonder if that's why in this recut they put him first.
To get him out of the way.
Seriously, because it is the weakest link of them all. I mean, technically, the salesman is the weakest link, but Dwight is the next, and I couldn't, watching them both versions sort of almost back to back. I was like, I think that's probably it, because once it got back to the Dwight stuff, I went back to feeling bored again, whereas I wasn't bored rewatching Marv's bit. I wasn't bored necessarily watching The Yellow Bastard, so I was
no.
There's something engaged with those others that's just not quite there. I mean, one of the things that annoyed the heck out of me with the Dwight stuff was you open with this moment with Brittany Murphy playing Sheila. And her new boyfriend is Dwight, and there's the great back and forth with Dwight and Jackie, and he does a toilet scene, blah blah blah, and then he goes. But at no other point in his storyline does he seem to give two shits about Sheila, and it all goes back to Gail. And
Absolutely.
I'm like, wait a minute, I thought this is your new girl, and you're super. I mean, the impression is you're meant to be in love with her, but then later on you meet up with Rosario Dawson, who is looking, my God, incredibly gorgeous.
Yeah. Two things about that. About the Dwight segment. One, absolutely, and I was almost shouting at the screen saying, "But what about you doing this for Sheila or whatever she's called?
Yeah,
you're not doing this
goes
for
back
Gail. What is your? Why are you now? Why do you care? Why are you involved in this? Your whole point you're doing this is he's coming around and terrorizing her, and you're telling him to leave him alone. And then you realize he's going into like forbidden territory.
Old Town.
Yeah, there's this truce between the prostitutes and the cops, and you realize that that's going to cause a bit of trouble. But why do you care about that? What's it got to do with you, really, is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And it was the only segment where I thought, this needs cutting. You can edit this and not lose anything, because I thought you could edit the mercenaries. And for my money, you could definitely edit dead Benicio del Toro talking to Clive Owen
in the car. Yeah.
In the car, which I think was directed by Tarantino.
Yeah, there is a guest. He gets a guest directing scene, but yeah.
Well, whether you love him or loathe him, he isn't needed here. Not for my money.
No.
Because it starts to get ridiculous, and I did genuinely, I think at one point go, like that, and just sort of, oh God, are we doing this? Are we? Because it doesn't. It's totally superfluous to everything. All it is Benicio del Toro needed screen time to justify his wage. That's the only reason, and they wanted Tarantino on board.
Yeah,
well, that's just self-indulgence to me.
There's other issues with the Dwight segment as well, and that is, I think it is by far the segment with some of the worst acting. And Alexis Bledel plays Becky.
Yeah.
And I know Alexis Bledel from the show Gilmore Girls. It was a big show in the States when I was a teen, played right before Smallville, so I ended up watching it because it was on right before Smallville. And I love Smallville. And in Gilmore Girls, she was by far the worst actor in that. She played the doe-eyed teenage girl who was the bookworm kind of person, and she was surrounded by a cast of incredible actors who could hold their own, and she was just sort of pulled along. The scene, the very first scene of her when Benicio del Toro pulls up alongside her walking down the street, is just painfully bad.
It is bad, yeah.
Her dialogue is delivered in such a way it just feels like a high school production stepped in, and it irritates. And she's like this throughout the whole film. Every scene she is in, I don't buy her as this I don't buy her as a prostitute. I don't buy her as anyone tough. I don't buy her as anyone who could say these hard boiled lines and make it believable. Like, you think about, like, I mean, Chandler might not have liked Veronica Lake, but she could deliver her lines.
Yeah, absolutely
believable.
Yeah,
they're probably the same height because they're both very short people. Like, there's just something about Alexis's performance that it pulled me out and made me cringe. And I thought, I don't know how you got this role. It confused me.
Yeah, well, and this pains me to say, because as I say, I do like him, but there are certain line deliveries and facial expressions of Clive Owen's that I think
absolutely.
I do. Yeah, I was doing this when I was doing school plays.
Yes,
back in 1852, whenever it was. So
yes,
so especially when he's trying to be this tough, he makes the mistake. What I think is a mistake of snarling when he's meant to be being tough, and it just makes you think you've never had to do anything tough in your life. Whereas you compare him to Mickey Rourke, who doesn't have to, as Marv, doesn't have to act tough, because you just know he is from the way that he moves and holds himself, so that he can deliver lines quietly. I've said this before. He can deliver lines quietly and have them filled with menace. And so can Bruce Willis to a certain extent. But Owen seems like a kid in this, and he's better than it. He's better than this performance would have you believe. That's what's really. So I find it frustrating, because I know he's better than what he's doing. And maybe I've said before about people like Tom Cruise who up their game when they're surrounded by really great actors.
Yeah,
perhaps Owen's the opposite, and he just slums it when he's surrounded by dross.
Well, you say that, but who was he around that was pull that could have pulled him up? All of the big actors were doing their other sections of the movie.
Yeah,
like
he
wasn't against Mickey Rourke. He wasn't against Willis.
He ought to.
He was probably distracted by Rosario Dawson's incredible.
Yeah, possibly. He ought to have blown everyone out of the water in his segment in terms of performance, and he doesn't. He's sort of on a par with them, and it's really, really disappointing and frustrating. So once I started to think, well, we could cut this, and it's not really working, I did wonder, why am I getting 4 stories when I think I could probably get away with 3?
Yes. The other bit that I think by watching both recuts and theatrical version is you do notice that there is an overuse of exposition to catch you up, because they are cramming in 3 books into one. And one of those moments happens in the Dwight segment when they are doing the exchange for Benicio del Toro's head for Gale, Rosario Dawson. And Becky starts saying, there's tape over his mouth. There wasn't tape over his mouth.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? The audience, how stupid do you think the audience is? We all know that. We can all see that. We're aware. What it's going to allude to, we don't know that yet. We don't know that he put a bomb in the guy's mouth. Okay,
no, we don't know. Yep.
But like we know that, and that scene, there was something else that happened in the Marv segment with Gale when they have Marv all tied up and they do the interrogation scene with Goldie's sister Wendy, and after once they realize he had nothing to do with her death. He's all tied up, and then suddenly he just like throws the ropes off, and then, which is a great scene, but it's ruined by the fact that Gale's character says, "I tied those knots myself. That's my specialty." At no point in this film did we ever see you tie a knot, not even your shoe. Like, what? Like,
not even your shoe.
You know what I mean? Like, there were so many things in little moments like that throughout this film that did annoy me on that side, that I just kept thinking, well, like the Dwight and Gale stuff. oh, she's the one I've always loved. We've always loved each other. Blah 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 blah. That's great to be told that. I don't buy it.
Yeah. I've not seen it.
You know.
And I thought you loved Shelley or Sheila, whatever she's called.
Which you never go back to. And
so suddenly Clive Owen's character, Dwight, I think you're a jerk. You know, so no matter how heroic you are now, I ain't going to be cheering for you. And I hope the Irish mercenaries, who I don't want to be in the film in the first place, kill you. You know, so, and we don't need to know that that's Gale's speciality with the ropes and the knots.
No,
it doesn't serve
need to
any
say that
purpose.
at all.
No,
it doesn't need to say it at all.
No. It's saved very quickly for me by Mickey Rourke, who you then learn has taken that beating just because he felt they needed to do it, you know, and he ends it by saying, besides, I don't hit girls.
Until he hits Wendy like
square
10
in the
minutes
face
later, until he knocks her out. Like, okay, I don't hit girls. I'm like,
unless I have to. Yeah.
Right. All right. Sure.
But I agree. So she didn't need to say it. That could have been jettisoned, and really should have been. They should have known better than that. And like, what was I saying about Dwight? Yeah, I think he's an idiot because he claims to love one woman when clearly he loves another. So why he's doing any of it is a complete mystery. It's totally muddled.
Well, I think this is the problem.
Talking about it now, I think they should just get rid of that segment. And if they're going to recut it, get rid of that segment.
Well, exactly. I think this is the problem of the movie, and that is it's trying to cram too many stories into one.
Yeah, give me an hour and a half film.
It's trying to be epic. It's trying to be this wide scope, film of these vignettes of look at all this nastiness going on with this sort of interconnectedness of the bar that everyone sort of starts in, except that doesn't happen in the recut because it starts with the banging on the door, which is just stupid. But it highlights the fact that they've probably cut stuff out. So I assume, because I've not read the comic book, but it just in terms of like writing point of view, I would say, okay, if Dwight is with Sheila now, we don't necessarily need to see them get together, but we do need to see some sort of conflict between his feelings for Sheila and giving in to his true feelings, which are for Gale. Something.
Yeah. And you're right. We certainly should have been told, whether that was by a very quick exposition line or otherwise, that he has feelings for Gale. She could have, Shelley, whoever, could have said.
Shelley. No, Sheila. Sorry, Sheila.
She could have said something along the lines of, well, why do you care anyway? Because, at the top of a hat, you're going to go back to her.
Yes. Exactly.
I'm only here for to bide your time until she takes you back, or whatever it would be. So that we know, because as it is, he suddenly starts talking about how she gave him the night of his life. What are you talking about? What are you on about? At least we saw Marv in bed with Goldie. Doing the deed. And so we know why he's doing it, because then when he then says nobody ever looks at me twice and won't give me what I want, and she did, and blah blah blah, we can put that image and that line together and get a history. Don't get any of that with Dwight. Don't get any of that with Dwight.
I do think, because you're mentioning like Dwight's kind of poor delivery with things. I do sort of get the vibe that it is the most B movie of the segments. And obviously there's a B movie quality to the entire movie. That is caked into the whole thing. That is part of it. But there is just an uber B moviness to Dwight's segments, his deliveries, what's happening, some of the dialogue. I think between that performance, the horrible performance by Becky, some of his dialogue exchanges, it just really highlights the B-ness and pulled me out. I wrote here that the relentless action and B moviness is getting tiresome. That is in my notes for that section.
That was exactly what I thought. I thought that they're overdoing this now. This is so exciting. It's boring.
Yes.
Because I've seen all this. by the time what are we in? What are we into the running time? By the time we were over an hour, aren't we? Into the running time, well over an hour before all this starts kicking off. I think, but I've seen all this and I cared more with Marv.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And like you said before, part of me, I do think the Bruce Willis story works. I like that one, apart from the problems that we've got with how he ends up. But if that was given a film of its own, you could perhaps explore that in some way. I don't know. But the Marv story definitely needed more. Could have had more time to develop.
Yeah,
because there was a little bit of, he gave me a name. And that led me to another guy who gave me another name, and suddenly he's at Rutger Hauer's monastery or whatever it is. I'd like to have seen those exchanges. And I would have taken those exchanges over the whole Blight segment any day of the week. Yes.
Well, I want to talk the bad guys in just a second. I want to talk Rutger Hauer and the senator guy. But there's two things I want to just mention before we get there. And that goes back to the way this is cut in the recut version. And so after the Dwight stuff all comes first, which, there are some really cool action scenes in there. There's some really cool visuals when he goes into the tar and it's just his white outline. I love all of those scenes throughout the movie.
Yeah, all that. All that.
I love the fact that when Dwight, like, he does that comic book, he jump off the building, he's got this slick red car and his Converse are bright red.
Bright red, yeah.
I love all of that stuff. Is great. When Benicio del Toro pulls up alongside Becky and like her eyes are crystal blue, but all of that stuff throughout this film.
And another great example, sorry, just to interrupt, another great example of that is Bruno del Toro's car is dull. Yeah. Until the lightning flashes and then it's bright blue. Stuff like that is fabulous. Fabulous.
Yes.
But to me, that's happening throughout the whole film.
Yes, or even the scene where Benicio's dead body is talking, and there's a cop behind them, and everything's black and white except for the cop lights. All of that stuff is really truly great. I love watching a lot of it. It has some problems here and there, in that that this film was filmed just like the Star Wars prequels, and that none of it was on a real set. It was all just green screen, blue screen rooms, and they're walking up to nothing, and they're acting in rooms of nothing. And, it, as an experiment, is exciting and fun and cool. As a way of doing cinema forever is not. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this film visually with some of those green screen stuff that I think were then also used into things like Sweeney Todd. They just, it feels fake. It works here because of the hyper realness of stuff, but gets a bit clunky. Anyway, I'm saying all that to then get back to my point is with the recut stuff. There's having this opening with Dwight was a bad idea in the recut. Very dull, very very tiresome. The other thing that's odd and lazy in the recut is that after the Dwight stuff, they do the salesman, the customer always rings twice segments, which just don't make sense for two reasons. One, they do not even replace the opening titles of the film to be earlier in the movie. So I'm watching this scene with Josh Hartnett. He kills the woman. Then they do the big cities pan, and then the title of the film comes up 43 minutes into the movie.
Well, that is mindless.
That's laziness. Laziness to me.
That would really, really. Well, I'd turn it off, I think, because I was
pissed. I was like, really? And this is before I realized what I was watching, and then when I realized what I was watching, I was like, oh my god, it's ridiculous. So
that is ludicrous.
Yes. So think about we've watched this whole scene. I've watched this whole segment with Dwight, and we obviously throughout the Dwight stuff we learned that Becky is a traitor. Then at the end of the salesman stuff, we see that he's probably going to kill Becky, which works so much better as a bookend to the film. But then you go into the Marv stuff, and Becky is there again. And again, you haven't had the John Haggard stuff. You haven't had the Bruce Willis stuff. So you don't quite know the connection in the timeline of everything. You're getting a bit more confused. And then you're watching this stuff with Marv and Becky's in the background. You're like, wait, she was ousted as a, as a rat. So why is she here? Okay, this must be taking place before all this other stuff happened. Okay, right. And so you're kind of trying to play catch up the whole time. Whereas with the film starting with Josh Hartnett and then going into Bruce Willis's stuff, it's just a little bit more clear.
It works so much better. Oddly, it works so much better when you realize that the timeline has all been simultaneous.
Mm.
And when that is presented as a sort of like twist on the old Agatha Christie thing, where you suddenly get, the same shots revealed to you from a different angle that show the truth of what was going on.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So that you realize, oh, it was all taking place at the same time, of course. Whereas if you tell it linear, which is, as I understand it, is what the recut version does, you will be left with inconsistencies because that's not the way it's meant to be presented.
Yeah,
I reckon if you watch Pulp Fiction on a linear basis, you wouldn't have a clue what was going on.
I mean, yeah, I probably not. I was confused. I was less confused with the theatrical cut. I was very, very confused with this recut. It just seemed bizarre.
So when you see Jessica Alba dancing in the theatrical cut on the table or whatever it is, you're actually concentrating on Marv.
Yes.
So she just you almost don't register her until it reveals at the end that she was there all along.
Yes.
That works for me. I'm not confused by that because I've not seen enough information to know who she is. She's just a woman dancing on a table.
Yes.
So that when she's then presented in a different context, this is what I mean by the Agatha Christie thing, you go, oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Then you think, that's clever, rather than thinking, I don't know what's going on here, and this is crap.
Yes.
So it doesn't work. That for me doesn't work at all. And I've not seen it. So
I mean, there's the other problems, and then we'll talk. I want to talk Rutger Hauer and Powers Booth. But the other problem that I do have with some of the linear or the timeline problems still aren't totally cured by the theatrical version, because the other thing that you have, and this is where I just like, some of this stuff should have been told. They just maybe should have found a different way to disseminate the narrative, but. In Bruce Willis's stuff, Bruce Willis's beginning and end happens first. All of it happens before anything else is Bruce's stuff. And the reason you know that is because when he goes to the farm, the Rourke farm, Elijah Wood's character is there and alive.
Yeah.
And we've just seen him die in Marv's segment because Marv kills him. And you're like, wait a minute. Okay, so it's odd to me, even still, that Bruce Willis's segment is split up and sort of partially bookending this film when actually you almost could have started. The only reason I think they did it was because then you get that reveal that Nancy is Jessica Alba, and you get it much later. And I think that's the only reason that they cut those two. That's the only logical thing I can think of.
Well, I would agree with that because that is a reveal. That is a reveal, and it shows that time has passed, I suppose, because that's why I think that's probably why Willis is cut in two. And that could have been solved if he just didn't show Elijah Wood at the farm.
Well, no, because the farm is blown up. Marv blows up the farm.
Oh yeah, of course he does.
So it's
not perfect, that is it?
No, so it's one of those things where it's like if you read this in a book, what might work in a book, and, book one is this, but book two is going to take place during this. It's much more complicated when you're trying to put all that together on screen. And sometimes you just need to go with the most linear way so that you're not confusing people as to what is what and when is when. So like another thing that just infuriated me was Marv has his friend Lucille, who we get introduced to and see just about everything there is to see about Lucille.
Yeah.
I was I was flabbergasted when she ends up being in the dungeon with Marv, and she's there with her hand cut off because Frodo ate it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Frodo
wait a
ate.
minute. I'm like, why did Frodo go after her in the first place? Why is she here? That seems like a hell of a coincidence. And this is where the film is jeopardizing character and story and fleshing things out, because they're putting all of these different comic books, smashing them into one for reasons that I'm assuming are, we don't know if we'll be able to make all four. Let's put all four into one.
Yeah,
and therefore you have jeopardizing moments like this, because
that does make sense, doesn't it? That we know that studios do that. We know studios do that.
Because the other thing that was annoying about it is that when you get to the Bruce Willis stuff in the extended recut, Lucille, is his parole officer. So when he goes to confess, he calls her up, and she's literally, they have seen her and Bruce have scenes together. There are scenes of her and Bruce in the theatrical cut. You just they flash by so quickly you don't realize it's her.
You don't. Yeah.
But there's a shot of him in front of the panel or whatnot, and she stood right next to him. But if you don't quite realize who's who, you're not going to realize. Oh, that's Neil. She knows Marv. You're not going to realize it.
That didn't register with me. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
That didn't register with me, because my attention wasn't on her. It was on Bruce Willis.
Yeah,
which I think is where that's where it should be. Your attention should be on Bruce Willis.
Yeah, it makes sense for them to have cut that for sure. But when you watch this recut extended, you're like, wait a minute, what? So you're more like, last time I saw her, she died. She just got shot. So why am I seeing her again alive with Bruce? When is this Bruce stuff happening? Because it's frustrating.
I think this. It makes sense to me to say we don't know if we're going to be able to make all the ones that we want to make. And we haven't got patience to see if that transpires. And they should have done this as they should have picked the Marv one, which I think would have been the most successful anyway, and made an hour and a half film, hour and 40-minute film out of that.
Definitely.
And see what happens. Yeah. That's what they should have done.
Yeah, it would have been amazing. It just would have been great. I think it really would have been. I really legitimately think it would have been fantastic if they'd done that.
But we've got what we've got.
We've got what we've got. The villains. So there are two sort of spectral villains throughout this piece. You have Rutger Hauer, who's playing Cardinal Patrick Henry Rourke. And then you have Powers Booth, who's playing Senator Ethan Rourke.
Yeah.
And yes, you have the Yellow Man. I'm not going to count Ethan Rourke Jr., but because he's not spectral, he's quite there. Marv's whole investigation leads him to Rutger Hauer. And again, in the recut version, because you start with Dwight, you don't really hear these names like the Cardinal Rourke or Senator Rourke. You hear them in the opening segments with Bruce Willis. And that sort of builds a little bit here and there, so that when you get to the Marv stuff, it all sorts to kind of come together. When you watch the recut version, because you start with Dwight, you don't really get any of that. But I did feel there was a sense of, I don't know about you, but there was a sense of sort of when we got to both of them. I just didn't. And I think, again, this is the sacrifice the film is making to cram so much stuff in. It's like, well, maybe I would have liked to have seen the relationship between Kevin, Elijah Wood's character, and Rutger Hauer. That would have been interesting.
I agree, and I don't think, great though I think he is, I don't think you need Powers Booth in this.
You really don't. He's kind of pointless.
His
son is the main thing. It's
and it's very nebulously said. Well, he wants to retain control of his own power and his senatorship. Yeah. Well, okay,
Yeah.
I was still thinking, man, this is 20 years before this, it was Philip Marlowe.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't think we need Senator Rourke.
No.
And I think Rutger Hauer, the Cardinal, and Kevin is a major missed opportunity,
Yes.
because I would like a little bit more explanation of how they become cannibals and think that they can consume a human soul by eating them.
Yeah.
Then I get, thanks very much. And again, this goes back to Marv. The Marv story should have been a single film. It should have been a single film that was just called The Hard Goodbye. It would have been a great title for a standalone film. So yeah, I agree. I did have a sense of, okay, I'm just supposed to buy that, so I'll just buy it and move on because that's what the film wants me to do. But really, I think you should be explaining this more. And what's more, showing me, because I don't know, until he kisses Kevin's decapitated head and says he had a voice of an angel, but he only spoke to me. I've got to take that this madman's word. And, well, why should I? You know what I mean? So, and I think that confrontation would have been much better than it is. I mean, it's not a bad confrontation as far as, because it's nicely acted, but it would have had much more of a kick and a punch in the guts if I'd seen something of the backstory to this and the history of it.
Yes.
Yes. And if this had been a film about a serial killer, and because the idea of the women's heads as trophies is a good one. It's a good one. And of course, it makes sense that he decapitates Kevin to make him one of them. So all that would have had much more of a payoff if they'd invested more in Marv and the Hard Goodbye than the rest of it, really. So I think it's a lost opportunity, and I think Rutger Hauer is wasted, really.
Yes, and his bad bald cap.
In a bad bald cap, and like unnaturally green eyes or whatever, yellow eyes or something he's got that don't really,
Yeah.
And I just think you deserve better, Rutger, I'm afraid.
I think so. What I can't remember. No, I don't think it was the same time frame. It might have been. There was at some point he was in Smallville. He was playing he was playing a main comic book character whose name I now can't remember. Morgan Edge. He was playing Morgan Edge in one season and then couldn't return for a second season, which was disappointing. I wonder if it was this film, but it might not have been this film. But it could possibly have been this.
He might have been shooting Batman Begins, of course. He's a major role in Batman Begins.
What?
And is that not released the year after this?
Wait, who is he in Batman Begins?
Rutger Hauer?
Yeah.
He's the head of Wayne Enterprises that fires Morgan Freeman.
Oh my God. It was probably Batman Begins. I completely, entirely forgot that Rutger Hauer was in. You know what? The thing it's because I very, very rarely revisit those films.
Yeah,
very rarely.
He's the one who says, "Didn't you get the memo?"
Yeah. Oh, yes. That. Yep. Of course. Duh. Yeah,
I am closing your department and I am firing you. He's brilliant in it, but he's one of the best things in it. So, I suspect he was filming
that could be it. But so I agree. An absolute waste of both Powers Booth and Rutger Hauer. I think there's so much going on in all four of these. Well, three of the four of these segments that. Ultimately, your big bads, which are Senator Rourke and Cardinal Rourke, they just get sort of overshadowed by everything else, which is, I find, because you think about it, Benicio del Toro's character is that he feels like more of a real bad than these main bads who are pulling the strings of everything.
Yeah, I agree.
What's his name? The guy who plays Kingpin in Daredevil.
Yeah, Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah, like his segment, even his stuff with his weird golden eye or whatever weird colored eye.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. Like he feels like more of the big bad, because he's like the big bad of that section, you know.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. Even though Rutger Hauer is the main bad of Marv's bit, is he? It just feels rushed. It feels like we rushed to get there because his investigation, as you mentioned, is montaged, and you're like, well, okay.
Yeah, it is montaged. That's the right word for it. And you know, why does he let Kevin do it? I know they believe the same thing, but how has he managed to convince Kevin that eating other people will harness their soul? How has he managed to do that? You know?
Yeah.
So, and the idea that the senator is holding on to his own power, we are just told that the Rourkes are in charge of everything.
Yeah.
I have no. If I walked out of the room and you forward wound it past Powers Booth's scenes, which aren't many, I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't know he was there. I wouldn't know he had been there. You know, so he's not serving a purpose other than what people tell me he is doing. Yeah. And you know, why is he not talking to the Cardinal when they are related? And if they are both in control of it, why is there no scenes with them? Because again, I'm going to say it. I'd rather watch a scene with Powers Booth and Rutger Hauer than anything in the Clive Owen section.
Yes.
You know, just to see those two great actors stand off against each other.
Yes. I think this is probably where, you know, we've said before, the problem is they're cramming too much stuff into this narrative. I think the other problem is that this is definitely a film where they were way more focused on style over substance.
I've written down here style over substance.
Yes.
And after a while, it does start to pale after a while for me.
Yes. So looking at, you know, when some of the research that I was doing, there were, because of the way they were shooting this stuff, they were filming scenes with stand-in actors, you know, because of the digitalness of this particular thing, and certain actors were then added during or digitally added into the film during post-production. I feel like you feel that in the movie at times.
Yeah, you do.
There's the quote from Rodriguez, who during the production of Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams, the Spy Kids movies lean very much into this kind of fake Star Wars prequel filming where they just film on green screen and there's nothing physical there. And he says, like George Lucas, this is the future. You don't have to wait 6 hours for a scene to be lighted. You want light over there, you grab a light, you put it over there. You want a nuclear submarine, you know, bam, there you go. You know, you can put your characters into it. And I do feel like that is, you know, while Sin City is very cool to look at and gave the world something slightly different and odd and interesting, it's not the answer to film in general. Because I mean, the scene where Marv gets hit by Wendy in the parking lot in the car, and then she goes speeding away, it all looks fake as shit.
Yeah,
it's raining half the time and no one's actually getting wet.
Yeah,
you know, I accept it because this is a comic book movie and it's all hyper real, but it's not the thing, you know what I mean?
It's not the future. I don't think it's the future. You know,
it wasn't. It's not.
No, yes, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. But I definitely had a sense of style over substance, because after a while, the trickery of it, and it did in The Watchmen for me to a certain extent. I start to think, well, I've seen this now. You've made your point. You know, that I can. You don't have to keep impressing me with every shot. You know.
Yeah.
So I know that blood in this film can be red, yellow, or white. You know, I've seen it.
Yeah.
There are occasional glimpses where I say, "Oh, that is," and like I say, Bruce Willis walking out of prison is one of them. But by that time, it had to be something really special to make me take notice of it. because you become desensitized to these things.
Yeah.
So and it stops looking brilliant because it's just become normal because you've seen too much of it. Now, once you've committed to making a film that looks like this, I suppose you've got to continue with that. But I would have been quite happy with some segments that were just all black and white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
with just the odd color.
Yeah.
I didn't need to have special camera tricks. And I think once you've made the point that you're aware that this is a comic book and you match panels as closely as you can, you don't have to do that in every scene.
Yeah.
Because that starts to then look fake and staged, and it can take you out of the action. It can take you out of the moment because you think they only care about this looking good. They don't care about what they're actually saying, doing, or the story they're telling. They're doing this so that people who've read the comic book will go, "Oh, great, that's the panel on page 30.
Oh, it's the panel from page.
Yeah. And your average Joe's saying, "So what?"
Yeah.
So I do like the way it looks, and I love the style of it. I love the heightened sense of reality. But you don't have to beat me across the face with it for 2 hours. Tone it down. Stop using it so that when something really beautiful does happen, stylistically, like Willis walking out of prison, it reminds me of how good the opening was, rather than me thinking, "Yeah, been there, seen that."
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's a good summation. And like I do think that Zack Snyder was taking notes, because if we compare the tome that is Watchmen to this 4-book series, he did a much better job of condensing that epic story into something that is quite good. I'm not a massive Zack Snyder fan, but I do quite like The Watchmen.
Watchmen does a very important thing for me. It encapsulates what the book is but it knows when to take things away. So it gets rid of that whole pirate ship thing, I seem to remember. Which is why I think The Watchmen isn't necessarily style over substance. It's a bit. But I think this is. I think this is very. I think it's a really good film. I do like the film, but I think it's it's its own worst enemy. Let's put it that way. It comes very close to spoiling what makes it good by overdoing what makes it good.
Yeah.
And
if not actually doing that,
I think
we might as well get into the ratings then, because I think it does spoil it. I think these superfluous scenes of Josh Hartnett's salesman serial hitman guy scenes are useless, aren't needed, cut them. I think the Dwight stuff just lacks the punch. I think it does lean too hard into its, oh, look how cool this looks so cool, doesn't it? Let's keep going with how cool this looks. It's like, all right, you found a good riff. You don't need to play that riff the whole song.
No, yeah. What the Dwight section does is overplay it so much that section becomes boring. That's the prime example of where it really is style over substance.
And I would have liked the film to have just been the hard goodbye. I think that would have been a wiser choice generally.
I agree with that.
So yeah, I guess we rate all of our films out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Sin City, I think I'm going to have to give 2.5 Falcons. That might be really harsh, but they're visually, I do, like we've said it before, it's really cool looking. It's all cool. I like it. It's a bit too much, but the big problem is the narrative it just doesn't hold together as well as it could have done.
Yeah.
And some of the dialogue and some of the acting is terrible. Becky's character is terrible. Clive Owens throws some bad performance, and some of Bruce Willis's voiceover is like borderline Harrison Ford voiceover from Blade Runner. Like, pull it together, old man. Another take, please.
Yeah, and some terrible dialogue there as well when he says, "Can't be my heart. I was cured."
Yeah,
and you think, "Oh, come on, we don't need this. We don't need any of this."
No.
So you giving it 2.5?
I'm 2.5. I'm harsh on this. It's I don't hate it. I will watch it again, but it just has too many problems for me to say, this is a 4-star film. I just can't go that far.
No. So my starting point is that I'm knocking a whole Falcon off for the Clive Owen section. So the most I can give this
Poor
is a
Clive.
4. Poor Clive, I know. And the reason, well, we've gone through it all, but part of the reason I just want to emphasize is that I think Clive Owen is really, really good.
Yeah.
And he disappoints me in this.
Yeah.
So without going over old ground again, I have a problem with the Bruce Willis segment for the reasons I've given. His narrative journey, his character arc. All my love is reserved for the Mickey Rourke section, which
All
in
my
itself-
love is reserved for Rosario Dawson.
which is well, I'll give her half a falcon just for you. So I'm gonna give it. I'm not gonna be as harsh as you. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. But most of that is for the Marv section, because if they presented that as a film in its own right, I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't be in the sort of 5 section, in the 5 area, 4.5 area.
I think that's fair enough. And I think that fits perfectly with this film, because apparently, according to a data analysis, Gizmodo UK apparently found out that Sin City to be the third most critically divisive film of recent years. So
well,
you're 3.5. I'm a 2.5. Data research. We've success.
We've proved you right. Yeah, we're perfect candidates for you. But interesting that neither of us even considered a 5 for this. And some of the films we've looked at, we've struggled. Desperately wanted to give a 5, and it just had to shave a couple of feathers off a falcon's wing because they're just not quite there. This was never going to be a 5 for me.
No, definitely not. It's a shame. It could have been in another world, but hey, I'm looking forward to one day doing A Dame to Kill For, because after watching this, I am curious as shit to see.
Well, we'll do it. We'll do it in a future episode, maybe.
Yeah, what this is, what happens next that actually is meant to happen in between other bits. So yeah.
The tragedy is that Marv won't be in it.
Mickey Rourke is in this movie.
Is he? Oh, in that case, I'll watch it.
Mickey Rourke is in this movie. So
wow.
Yeah. So there we go. Well, I guess that's the end. Make sure to, if you haven't yet, leave us reviews on Apple and Spotify. They really help us out. Make sure to do that. So yeah, but with that, without further ado, I think we've successfully investigated Sin City. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another case. In the meantime, like I said, please like and subscribe, and be sure to take care walking down those mean streets.